morning, afternoon, evening. How's everybody doing today? I am Mark from rhythmguitarlessons.net, and today we're doing a live stream with my very good friend Simon Candy, all the way from the land down under. And today we're going to be talking about 3 ways to add melody to your chord changes, your rhythms. Um, Simon has some really cool ideas and things that you could do to spice up your melody. If you're watching now and you want to comment as to where you guys are located in the world, put it in the chat. I see that we actually had a few early birds. So Anders from Sweden, thanks for checking in with us. Lars from Sweden, Janine from Northern California, Daniel from Sweden. Very cool. Three from Sweden right now. Very cool. And Janine from out in California. If you have any questions, you're welcome to put them in the chat later on. We'll do our best to answer them for you if we have time. So, without further ado, this is my friend Simon Candy from Acoustic Guitar Lessons Online.net. Simon, how are you doing, my friend?
I'm doing well, Mark. How are you?
Cool. I began to gaff that, but it's Acoustic Guitar Lessons Online.net.
Correct. Your rhythm guitar lessons.
Yeah, I'm rhythmguitarlessons.net. You know, it all blends together.
Exactly.
Cool. So Bob just joined us from England, Debbie from Chicago, Robert from Washington State. Welcome, everybody. Very cool. Glad to see that everybody was able to join us. Very cool. Paul, London via Sacramento and Australia. I guess he lives in 3 different locations around the world.
Yo, variety.
Oh, that sounds like a very charmed life. George from Greece. Very cool. Cool. Oh, Philippines. We got somebody from the Philippines. This is awesome.
Nice.
Very cool. Well, anyways, let's talk about our topic at hand. Okay, so the whole idea of it was to have us be able to create some type of melodic thing that happens when we play chords. Instead of just playing basic chords, what can we do to make it sound more interesting? And I thought that'd be a good topic. I see you play. I've watched you play many times, and you've been doing it for so long that you probably don't even think about doing it anymore. It just kind of happens naturally. And that's a wonderful place to be. I'm not quite there yet. Even though I teach rhythm guitar, I know about it. I know how to do it fairly fluently, but it's not as second nature as you. So that's why I figure I would ask you these questions. Now, I have, a couple of ideas of how I do things, and they're similar to what you do, but I would like to get your take, your opinion, your point of view, how you would teach some of this stuff to people. And so let's first start off with, I don't know, you pick. You tell me what you want to start with.
Okay. Well, adding melody to chords. So let's say I've got a few things here. I'm just thinking which one can we go with first. So let's just start kind of basic, I guess, although if it's all new to you, it's going to be not so basic perhaps, but the concept's pretty basic. So let's say we're just playing in an open position, open chords, and we've got our static sort of, cowboy chords that we all play there, C, G. If we're staying in the key of, let's be in the key of C here. So we've got E minor, we've got F, these are the chords available to us in C. And then we have notes in this first position that all belong to the key of C as well. So you could play a straight up C major scale, but you've also got notes either end of the spectrum there above this C that are also in the key of C, just extending into a second octave there, that are still within reach of the open position, and the lower octave we've got a few notes that are in the key of C here as well, all from the key of C, all natural notes being in the key of C here. So we can add any of those notes to the chords that we play in the key of C major. So a thing I like to do, if we just an approach is how I would teach this, and I do have a video on this on my YouTube channel, which I think I sort of refer to as chord melody mechanics, but it doesn't necessarily have to be directly related to chord melody stuff, but it's adding notes to the chords. So think of like sitting at a piano. On one hand, our left hand is going to play the chord, and our right hand is going to play the notes, C major here, and let's play some notes in C major here. We can sort of visualize that and get that as a concept, because we can all visualize someone sitting at a piano. It's a very universal instrument. We can all relate to it, even if we don't play it. So same sort of thing here. I've got my chord, and then I want to keep that chord. We don't have to, but for this approach, keep the chord ringing through, sustaining as much as possible while playing the notes of C major. So again, with the piano, you're holding and sustaining the chord and playing notes on top as that chord rings out. So I've got C, and I can come down the scale to my low C. Okay, I'm going from the high G, even if let's just keep it from C to C for simplicity. So starting from the C note on under my first finger. Right, there's my C major scale. Now, as I go down the scale, I do have to lift some fingers away, because otherwise I'm not going to get the notes of the scale. But at the whole time, that third finger stays on, so there's something sustaining, and I only lift the fingers away from the chord when needed, not beforehand. So here I have to lift my first finger off to get the B, then that same finger can play the A on the second fret of the third string, then it comes away for the G. Pinky would play the F, because I want to keep this formation of the C as long as possible. Then there's my E, which is in the chord, then I take that away, and then I come down to my C, and then I can just put these fingers back on and strum the C chord. So there's no point where there's really the chord lacking. Now I could just play the chord too. There's nothing wrong with that. We can separate it and so forth. But you've got the foundation there to then add melody into the chord. Whatever you want to do. You can do a lot, you can do a little, and then you can take any other chord from the key and do the same thing, right?
So I was just gonna say, so can you do a little bit of that and then just change chords in the key?
Yes. So let's say we go to the 5 chord.
You're going to be keeping the same notes of the C major scale.
Exactly.
We'll just be playing the chord changes that all are chords that are in the key of C.
Yes. And when I did this video, there was a little bit of confusion I found in the comments, is like, why are you playing an F when it's a G chord and it should be F sharp? But we're not changing to the key. I know you know this, Mark, but we're not changing to the key of G. We're in the key of C, and we're now going to play the 5 chord of C, which is G. And so for the purpose of going from root note to root note, now with a G chord, I should mention first, a lot of the time, if I'm going to add melody to a G chord, I'm going to simplify this G chord. I'm not going to play this, and I'm certainly not going to do that, where all 4 fingers are busy and there's nothing sort of ready this side to play notes. I just play it at most, and sometimes I don't even put the top note in, but for this I will. I use my 3rd finger, I block the 5th string out, so I don't need my 2nd finger down there, and I got my pinky on top. And that's a nice full G chord. If you're finger picking, then you can select the strings. I'm just using a pick right now. So that's my chord, and then I can just come down the scale down to the G, and then finish with the chord. So same sort of thing, just a bit more range there, because the range of the G chord is bigger there than the C. Okay, so we get more of the notes. So these are all notes from C major. So because we're in the key of C. So if I had like a little chord progression, let's say a little vamp on C to G, then you can add those notes in any sort of way you want. Keep it real simple to start. You could like play the same line on both chords, maybe something like this. So I'm just playing the same line on both chords because it's going to work, but of course the line changes in the way it sounds because it's in one point it's against the C chord, here it's against the G chord. I could take the A minor, the F, back to C.
Totally.
Right? So there's endless amounts of things that you could really do there. You can be very, very minimal, just little, what you'd call like little embellishments to the chord, or you could take, full runs, full, scale runs and whatever you want to do in between the chords. So
Yes. So there's actually a very relevant question that I want to add in right now and not wait to the end, seeing how we're talking about it.
yes.
Okay. So he wanted, this is Roberto. He wanted to know if you're using a pentatonic box pattern.
No. So I'm playing the full range of the major scale here. So I could play a pentatonic scale here. It's going to be in an open position, so it's not going to probably represent the shape as you might kind of be most familiar with it because of an open string. But I could play like, that's a C major pentatonic scale in open position. So
Right.
I could do that, but here I'm including all notes of the key, but the key's not changing. The chords change within the key, but I'm just grabbing all the open natural notes in the open position. So if you've ever sort of looked at some guitar method books and they start to teach you how to read music and all this sort of stuff, they teach you all the natural notes in that first position. That's what I'm grabbing from. So I could technically go from C to C and play a C major scale, but and that's kind of the core of it. But I want to, if there's notes below that root note, which there will be in the key of C, I want to have access to them as well as notes above, if that makes sense.
Yes, it does. And then Roberto, on the second half of your question, how to choose between major and minor boxes, if that's what he was playing, he's not changing between major and minor boxes. If he was playing the C major pentatonic in the open position, he'll always continue to play those same notes in the open position of the C major pentatonic, regardless of what the chord was previously or what comes next. So he's constantly keeping the same scale, even though the chords are changing.
Exactly. And so if I was, let's say I'm playing C, this is C major, using those notes and a combination of those notes. If I change my chord to A minor, now we're hearing A minor there. Now, if I just stayed on A minor and I just sort of made A minor the root chord and I even just vamped on an A minor chord, you're going to be hearing A minor all the way because it's relative to C. They've got the same notes. What determines what you hear is the chord in the back. So it all depends if on the chord progression, if it's grounded in C major, if C's the one chord, or if A minor is the one chord. And you'll know by listening, and often if it's going to be C major chord progression, it'll start on a C chord. And if it's going to be A minor chord progression, it'll start on A minor.
Yep.
Hopefully
Or,
that doesn't.
I mean, like, for example, also, Robert, Simon was talking about trying to keep a note ringing. Even if you were to play something like a D minor chord, which would be the D chord in that key, even if you couldn't keep a note ringing and you just wanted to play those notes in between your chords, if there was no notes ringing, that also would work as well.
Absolutely.
So if you can't keep a note ringing, it's okay if you don't, because all of those same notes are still going to work. They're all still going to work. Even if you stop the note from ringing, it's always going to be the same exact scale. Now, if you want to go more advanced than that, you could switch from, if we're talking in a pentatonic sense or any kind of modal sense, we could switch. We're going to play this major uh, uh, chord and then follow it or embellish with the notes from that scale, and then play the D minor chord and then play notes from the D minor scale, which would be, it would include some, but then there would be others. But to keep it super simple, just keep the scale the same and it's always going to sound good. Cool. Very cool. I just wanted to make sure we hit that because it's so relevant to what we're talking about right now. And that way you didn't get lost in the shuffle, because that was exactly what you brought up. There was some confusion in your free resource. That's exactly what I perceived to be the type of confusion in the questions that you had.
Yes, it'll be like, hang on, there's not an F sharp, there's not an F note in the G, in the key of G, but and that's correct. But yes, we're not in the key of G, we're in the key of C. G is the 5 chord, or like, you know.
Yeah, well, I'll tell you what. Here's another one, Janine. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So this is very relevant. So let's just hit it now.
Yeah.
So if you're fretting a bar chord, will this still work?
Yeah.
If you have all the notes fretted and just pick them individually and arpeggiate it.
So if you were playing a bar chord, let's just stay in the key of C.
Yeah.
And so I'm just thinking, if I'm playing a bar chord here, might be. I mean, you could, you know, pick out the notes of the chord, just arpeggiate the chord. It might be a little more challenging to hold the shape and play the notes, but we don't necessarily have to, as you said, Mark. But I'm probably not going to do this where I'm playing C and then I'm going to go play some stuff and then I'm going to go, you know, I'm going to find the same notes here. So here for me, you could use the pentatonic scale.
Yeah.
That's C major pentatonic there. So, you know, you've got your options, or you could use the full major scale and see how that fits around the chord. That's a little bit more bluesy, but yes, so it does work, but you might have not as many opportunities for the sustaining of the chord and the notes, and you'd want to find the equivalent notes in the position of the chord you're playing ideally.
Cool. Very cool. Well, one other thing. So now, like, if somebody thought that, hey, listen, I don't know my notes up here. I just know what the shapes are for some chords, but I do know, you know, we'll stay in the key of C or A minor because they're the same notes. But I do know, you know, your minor pentatonic box pattern on the 5th fret, and that's either C major or A minor, and you know some of these chords. You don't need to know actually what you're doing to do it if you wanted to. So it's not that big of a jump to go from the 5th fret to first position chord. So if that's all that you know, and you wanted to do that, that's a great entry, into this whole kind of thing of playing these individual notes in between chords. Even if we didn't want to let a note ring or anything like that. I mean, obviously we could, if we're playing an A minor, we could let the A string ring. But other notes, other strings may not be able to ring. But if you just wanted to start and stop, it's a great way to almost accompany yourself, you know, and start and stop. And it's actually a really great way to work on improvisation.
Yeah, absolutely.
I call this the party trick. So for any of my students, it's like, if they know that stuff, I'm like, do that.
Yes.
If somebody says, oh, you play guitar, play me something. And I call it a party trick because, first of all, if you play a song they know and you don't play it right, they're going to know it. So if you do something like this, you don't necessarily have to have a plan at all. As long as you know what chords to play in a certain key, what pattern to play, you know, and you could just, I mean, you could do it in free time. Nothing has to actually have any kind of structure to it at all. You know,
yes.
You could use rubato in free time freely, and it's very impressive to somebody who doesn't play guitar, because you're playing single notes. Sometimes you're playing chords the other time. And so if you're not even at the point of combining them together, it's a great way to start.
And I didn't, yeah, and I didn't mean to imply before, in case someone thought that I was saying you couldn't move, because absolutely you can play a chord and go play some notes wherever you want on the fretboard.
Right.
Perfectly fine, done all the time. So like you're demonstrating there, there's no problem playing an A minor chord and then playing some fill from the pentatonic scale,
Yeah.
as you were doing, is perfectly fine to do. We don't have to stay in the same position.
Right.
We
But
can,
it is a big jump. So if you're not used to doing that,
yes,
you know what I mean?
Yes.
That might be it might be easier just to learn the notes of where you are instead of developing the skill of having to accurately jump back and forth that span of the fretboard.
yes,
I know that's what you meant.
yes. Yeah. And a couple of examples that just come to mind in turn. I mean, you'll find all this stuff in the music you play and this sort of stuff happening. But a song for me that, many years ago, "Patience" by Guns N' Roses. This does this sort of thing, and it's like if I can just play something along the lines of what's happening in that song. It's got like. Right, so it's playing on the C, it's got an I on the G, coming down the scale a little bit to the A, so, and to the D, playing some little embellishments off the chords. So that was a song that taught me a lot about that sort of playing, because it was early on in my development when I learnt that. Another one that just comes to mind, if I think it's an F sharp minor to an E chord, and this would be an example of where I think the chord's played, then you got the line, and then the chord. It's not ringing over. So it's this song, "And I Love Her" by the Beatles. I think it goes. It's the same line both times, but it's over the F sharp minor. The second time, it's over the E. It's an E6 chord there. We would just call it E. So that's the line, then the chord, and then the line again, this time over the E. So we're not holding the chord and playing that line, we're playing the line, then the chord. So there's just a couple of examples that came to mind that are using this sort of concept, where you got melody built into the chord progression. And I mean, that Beatles tune, it's so iconic and it's so simple, but without that it's still a good song, but it's not as perhaps recognizable until you put in that little very, very simple line straight from the major scale.
It doesn't take much to have it be very clever and cool.
Absolutely. Sometimes that's the hardest part, is the simplicity. It's so simple, and we try to make things so complicated sometimes because we think that's going to sound good, or that's how it is, but often it's very, very simple.
Well, look at AC/DC. They've used the same 3 chords their whole entire career, and they keep coming up with clever ways to keep doing the same thing over and over again.
Exactly. Absolutely.
Same 3 chords.
Yes. There's another concept that I only actually learned the name of this recently, but it's a thing that I hear a lot and would do. The concept is called CESH. CESH, and it stands for contrapuntal elaboration of static harmony. So it sounds very, very complicated, right? However, the concept is a moving line within a static chord. So if I had something like a D minor chord going to, let's say, an A chord, that's the chord progression, that's the chord vamp. I can have a line in the chord of D minor that's moving over the D minor chord. So I've got this line in the chord going from my D flat, C down to B before resolving to the A chord. So I'm not thinking of that as like 5 or 6 different chords. It's D minor all the way here. It's just got movement in the chord. Right, chromatic movement within the chord shape. Another example would be if I'm like on this A suspended chord, I'm going to move this note. This is like, I think of this as, an A chord going to a D, let's say. So I'm going to move chromatically from the 5th of the chord up to the 7th. So it's kind of an A7 sound, really. So we've got this. And then I could come to D, maybe D minor there, and to the A. So there's a chromatic movement, but this is not 4 chords. This is one chord, one static sound with one of the voices moving in the chord. You can do it like on an A minor and move up chromatically in a similar sort of way. And it's just adding movement inside your chord while you're sitting on a static sound. There's a song that came to mind that does this sort of thing, which is Catch Me, Led Zeppelin.
Yeah.
So it's got this, I'm just reading off here, I've never learnt this song, but so I'll just play it as best I can, and I'm not tuned as they will be. But this is the static chord is this. It's actually unison D notes, so it's implying a D chord of some sort here. And there's a line that moves up on the 3rd string. So it's like, right, so that's just moving up chromatically for the most part. Yeah, step there, and then we come back down. So it's all one chord there. There's one static chord happening, and there's movement within that static sound, if that makes sense.
And what is that called again? Because I haven't heard of this.
No, see, I did this.
I mean, I've heard it a million times because you were playing something else where you're moving the line, and it sounded like Pink Floyd.
All right, yeah. It's an acronym. It's CESH, CESH.
CESH.
CESH. Yes, I could. I can write in the chat. Can I?
I believe. I'm not sure.
Or I can send it to you. Maybe I can just send it to you here, Matt. So
yeah, I could post it. I could post it in the
yes.
Yes.
So that's what it stands for.
If
and that's the acronym CESH, CESH.
Okay.
So I was not aware of the term of it, but I'm certainly aware of, I mean, you sort of hear it, come back to Led Zeppelin, you hear it a bit in, there's movement in that chord in the bass, and there's also movement up top, but that's probably a little bit more sort of voice leading than, I don't know, but there's still movement.
That's what I was going to bring up. It's like, I know exactly what you're talking about, and I've heard it a million times, and it's sort of like, it's not really voice leading, but I guess it could be, but you'd be writing a whole bunch of chords with slash chords with constantly moving, like, let's just say if it was in the bass, with the line that you were moving, you'd be writing all of these chords, and it'd be the same chord, but the bass note would always just keep changing.
Yes, and when I did it here...
It's not really voice leading, especially if it's running chromatically.
Yeah.
I guess we could do mental gymnastics and get Tommaso in here and come up with some name of some chord, you know what I mean? But really, it's just like the bass line is changing. But is that really voice leading? You know what I mean?
Well, I guess in essence it is. I mean, voice leading is how the voices move from one chord to another. And even if we're within a static chord, perhaps we're still saying there's a voice moving within the chord. So for this example here...
voice moving within the chord before we get to the next chord.
Yes. And so that does affect the sound. Like here I've got D minor. Here it's D minor major 7. Here it's D minor 7. Here it's D minor 6. So it does affect but that's still D. It's just shades of D minor there.
Correct.
It's still all D minor. I still am hearing D minor, so I could just sit on D minor if I wanted. But
Right.
this is where we can bring in some nice, movement over a static chord, which again you'll find, you'll find it in plenty of tunes, I'm sure, along the way.
Yeah, well, I feel as though that's actually a better definition, especially if you're moving chromatically,
Yes.
instead of like it being voice leading, because there's movement within the chord. You're not
Hmm.
playing all these bunch of different chords to get to the next chord. You're just altering the chord that you're staying on for a while.
Yes.
That's pretty cool, man.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's a cool concept. So, you can experiment with that. I mean,
Hold on. Janine just said something very funny. That's funny because that's what Ultimate Guitar does. They'll come up with all these different chord shapes that you need to do, and it's like this whole big row of stuff, and it's like, what is going on here? And then if you actually look at the tab itself and not the chord blocks that they're showing you, it's just the same thing. There's just one note keeps moving.
yes.
I've seen that a million times. Very good observation, Janine. That was
Yes.
I agree. I agree. That's pretty funny. Yeah,
And
well,
then,
that's pretty cool, man. I like that. That's cool. I learned something today too. That's
and
actually
then
pretty cool.
the name of that song, someone's asking, Debbie is asking, it's Kashmir by Led Zeppelin. Cashmir, if I'm not mistaken.
Is it is it
Was
spelled
that example, which
or is it
was,
a K? Do they spell it with a
oh,
K?
sorry, K. Did I say C? Yeah, I meant to say K.
If
It is K.
anybody knows in the chat the correct spelling of Kashmir by Led Zeppelin, because I believe the word cashmere is spelled with a C if we're talking about clothing, isn't that correct?
Yeah, it's definitely K. It's definitely K. Kashmir. Yes.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah,
so
very cool.
there's another one. There's a few of I mean, they got such great chord progressions and so forth. You'd find more of this in Led Zeppelin for sure, and plenty of bands. But something that you can experiment with yourself. So that's a different way to look at adding melody and movement within chords as opposed to the first approach that we had a look at.
Yeah, well, so like, yeah, the first approach, that's the second approach. Something that we were kind of touched on when we were talking about the first approach is when you're talking about embellishing chords,
Yes.
right? So that could be another way where you're really just keeping your chord shape and just lifting a finger, or maybe I have my pinky available here, but we do it more in a not arpeggiating form. You could do it in more of a strumming type of form. So even if you're not really accurate with your right hand for arpeggiating and things like that, using a pick, or even if you're using a finger style, you could always strum these and just lift a finger off and put a finger down.
Exactly.
And
Yeah.
the cool thing about that is you don't even really need to know what you're doing. If it sounds okay, then probably it's a correct thing.
Yes. That's
And
something.
so,
Yeah.
like, you don't need to know that I'm playing this note, and when I take it off, it's going to be now I'm going to have that note ringing. You can just put fingers down and then lift one off at a time and see if you like the way it sounds.
Yeah.
Right? Go to a different chord and do that. So you really don't even necessarily need to know what you're doing or what key you're in or what notes are in the key, and it doesn't matter because music comes first. If it sounds good, then you could let somebody else try to explain to you why it's right or
Yes.
wrong or how it bends a rule, but everybody uses it.
Hmm.
If it sounds good to you, you could do that too.
Yeah. Absolutely. And
You
that's
know,
a good approach. I think I always sort of use that as a way into chord embellishments and extensions, because whilst any sort of area of guitar playing can be taken to a higher level, that's quite, you can add notes by taking fingers away. You might think you're taking a note away when you do this to a C chord. You're adding a note to the C chord because you've
Correct.
already got a C here. This is a C. Take that C off. Now you've got a B, which is not in the chord otherwise. So by taking a finger away, you've now added a note, and it's, arguably a simpler chord to play with 2 fingers, not 3. But then as you did, you can take them on and off, and any finger can be taken off to then hammer back on, play the open string and hammer it on within a chord. All the pull-offs and all these sorts of things you can, or pick them if you want. You don't have to play them legato. But yeah, there's some very, or yeah, as you said, adding the pinky and so forth. All those.
Yeah, exactly. You don't. I have this like one page of like all open position 7th chords, major 7th, minor 7th, dominant 7th chords that I give to my students. And they look at this sheet and they go, oh, so I could see it in their eyes. I says, actually, there's shapes that you already know, and you're actually just going to be taking a finger away. And they start going into this, they're like, oh yeah. I go, they're actually easier. Sometimes you're just using less fingers.
Yes.
And you're taking a shape, and you're taking a finger away. I says, it looks intimidating. I says, but it's actually really not that intimidating.
Yeah.
So a lot of times that's what you're doing too. You're adding a 7 in or something like that.
Yes.
Yeah. It's pretty cool. And like I said, you don't actually need to know. I mean, as well as I do, music existed, and then the eggheads came along and tried to explain why is it that everybody's doing the same thing or that it sounds good.
Yeah.
So the music theory comes second.
Yes.
Music existed first, and then somebody wanted to know why does it work.
Yes. So they come up with the rules.
What, a couple hundred years ago?
Yeah.
How long has music existed?
Yeah.
Thousands of years?
Yeah.
Thousands and thousands of years. It wasn't until just a couple hundred years ago that somebody said, let's see if we could try to explain this.
Yeah.
So if it sounds good to you, then it's right.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Very cool. One other thing too, we're talking about holding down chords and embellishing though too. They also can be done with bar chords as well. It's not always just here. So if I'm just going to play like an A minor 7th, I got my pinky here. And I'm just playing straight out of the pentatonic scale. Well, that one wasn't, but if you do know your the minor scale, you could add all of those extra notes in too. And especially if you're playing on your treble strings, you could let those bass strings ring while you're doing these embellishments as well with these 2 available fingers, and play any notes out of that scale as well.
Yes.
So you could do it with your open position. You could also do it in bar chords, And like I said, I'm taking a finger away, so I'm making the 7 chord, the minor 7 chord, and then now that gives me 2 fingers to do other cool stuff.
Yes.
Yeah. Very cool.
And you've got that. This isn't perhaps everyone's cup of tea, depending on size of hand and all this sort of stuff, but you can play your bar chords, like the root 6, for example. If I'm playing on an A chord here, of course we can bar it, but we can use the thumb and then grab the triad there, the middle sort of fragment of the chord. And I would often play like that. I used to play like that a bit when I was many years ago playing in a trio, and there was someone playing. I think I was on electric at the time, but on a clean sort of sound, and someone else on a 12-string strumming big chords. So I didn't want to sort of have these big shapes. I wanted to sort of reduce that sound down a little bit and only have one instance of each note, not doubling up. If I've got the full bar chord, I've got 3 A notes and I've got 2 E notes in there. If I do this, I have 2 A notes, but I only have 1 C sharp, 1 E note. So it's a bit of a more I don't know, less dense sound. Not better, not worse, just suitable for certain situations. But then it frees up your pinky to add embellishments on that chord. You could even branch out to grab the G sharp down here. But you can my pinky can play either the 7th fret on the 1st string to add the 9 to the chord, or the 6th of the chord by playing the 7th fret on the 2nd string, or suspend the chord and resolve it back if we want by playing the 7th fret on the 3rd string. So all the same fret, just different strings, different shades of the A. And of course it's a bar chord, it's fretted notes, so we can do that, and you can, you know, all the Hendrix thing and you know, all the rhythm fill stuff and all this sort of thing that you can sort of branch off from there. But it's, yeah, there's how you can sort of approach it with bar chords.
Well, all of this stuff that we're talking about, it really blurs the line between, is it melody or is it rhythm? It's actually a little bit of both.
Yes.
You know, so just like you said, the Hendrix thing, you know?
Yes.
You know, a lot of songs that you're familiar with, you know, I believe, and this is just my opinion, in the creation of these things, it wasn't this mathematical thing in which they did. They just knew that they can add and take notes away, which one sounded good. Maybe they knew the theory behind it, but maybe they didn't. And, you know, a lot of songs, maybe after the fact, it's like, oh, well, that sounds cool. Why does that work? But maybe that question never even got asked. It's more of just doing, you know, and just kind of like messing about on the guitar and saying, well, that's pretty cool. That all sounds good. You know what I mean? And if they wanted to go back and try to figure it out, cool. If not, it's like, well, it works. It's fine. So I don't really know, meaning as far as popular music goes, like all the fills and stuff, like the Hendrixy kind of stuff. I don't think he sat down and just said, hey, listen, I'm going to play this chord and I think I'm going to embellish it with this note, that note, and the other note. I just think it was more intuitive because he'd done it before and he knows that it sounds good. You know?
Yes. And I think it's hearing other people do it. So before him, I think it was Curtis Mayfield, I think that's kind of the guy I think who really kind of first did that type of thing to the extent that he did, and then Hendrix sort of caught on to that and thought, sounds cool, you know, from the R&B and the Motown and all that sort of stuff, and those cool soul and funk and whatever, you know, it's all kind of developed over the years. But
yes.
But it's a cool way to play. We've done a stream on that before, I believe. So you'd have one on your channel, or I certainly have videos on it too, just in terms of the rhythm fill type stuff. It's always popular to do. And one other approach I think is worth perhaps looking at, and it's kind of this static movement on a static chord, but in a different approach, would be just simple triad shapes.
Yes.
Because if you move triad shapes around, built in is sort of melody. So if someone's playing on an A chord, for example, and let's say we just take the triads on strings 3, 2, 1, top 3 strings. So I've got this triad here, I've got this one here, and I could play this one down the octave here. It's got an open string, but if I play it up an octave, you've got the closed shape there. That's the 3 triad shapes for A major on the 3, 2, 1 string set. Now when I play that and I just move between them, there's melody without you doing anything, because the melody note, which is typically the top note in the chord, changes, because we're inverting the chord. We're changing the order of the notes each time we play it, but it's the same notes, just different order, and sometimes different octaves. So that's my melody note. But when I go here, that's my melody note. And when I go here, that's my melody note. So we could have someone sitting on an A chord, and you could be playing some, you know, those chords while that person's sitting on a static chord, and you've got this melody happening simply because you're moving the chord. And then often you might neighbor sort of, you can play either a fret below or a fret above, and typically on the weaker beats, the off beats, to add some interest. So, you know, something like sort of a bluesy sort of thing. And if I was going to the 4 chord, I can do the same with D triads, back to A. And then in the E, D, A. Right, so, and I was pedaling an A string there to imply the chord, which you can do in that key, but someone else could be playing the chords. You don't have to do that. You could just be the, and then, you know, you can add notes around the chord, etc. So there's more that you could fill in there, but I was really just using chord tones inverted and then approaching them from a half step above or below. So that's a similar thing to the CESH thing. It wasn't inside the chord so much. The chords just sit and static down here, and then you're moving inversions around to change the top note, which then creates the melody.
Yes, absolutely. And then if you get that happening and you're familiar just with using the triads of the chord that you're playing, we could also combine the first thing that we were talking about, in the sense of we can always just play the triads of the key.
Yes.
And change chords as well.
Yes.
So you can go from an A major triad to a B minor to a C sharp minor, you know what I mean? And use triads as your fills in between your chord changes, but we're keeping the triads strictly just to the key, just like we played the individual notes, and we could change chords that way too.
So you mean something like, so if, let's say we got like an A chord, you could sort of, like you got A, but you got B minor, you got C minor, but that's a little fill that could happen over that A chord.
Correct. You could use combinations of those different chords in between. Yes. Yes.
Yes.
Exactly.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you can connect for sure. Like you could even, let's say you got an A chord going to a D chord, you could be on your A, and when it's coming up to that D chord, you can connect it, and then there you are.
There you
on
are.
the D chord. So instead of just going, hey, here's my A, now here's my D, we can connect it with the diatonic triad in between those two chords, and yeah, that's cool. That's another way that you could do it, as you've just
You know what I mean? So
yeah,
I mean, you could do it with the single note if you wanted to, you know? I mean, that would be fine too. But if you wanted a fatter, more chordal type sound, instead of just, you know, instead of just playing that, you just play triads.
Yes.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's very cool too. And then, you know, if you didn't want to play a full triad, you could also just play your root in your major or minor third, and that's going to imply that triad type sound, because it's going to give you a major or a minor sound.
Yeah, it reminds me sort of the sixths.
Exactly. Yes.
So that's kind of the outside notes, I guess. You get the sixth harmony, all the thirds, and so forth. But yeah, you sort of just playing little fragments of it, and you get
that's
double
it.
stops and things.
You know,
like
you're playing an A minor. I could just play these two notes here on the middle two strings, third fret and second fret.
Yep.
And that gives me my F major sound. I take the same shape, I move it up 2 frets. There's my G major sound, frets 7 and 5. There's back to my A minor, move it up, my B diminished, 1 fret higher, C major. So C major, back to D minor, between 12 and 10.
Yep.
You know, E minor, and that brings us back to the beginning again.
Yes.
And that's just all within the same chord change.
Yes, yeah, just sitting all over the
And I'm just playing two notes.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So that's
Reminded me of
Rhiannon.
yeah,
Very
yeah,
similar.
same sort of whatever it does.
Exactly.
But yeah, and then you could also you could play them separately, like hold the shapes, but play the note separately
Yep.
in some sort of little, picking pattern across just the dyads there, the two note chords, the double
Totally,
stops.
man.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it just keeps sort of expand. There's just so many different ways you can. It's not just chord melody. It's just different ways you can mesh the two together.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, I mean, my advice to anybody wanting to learn about this kind of stuff is just pick one thing maybe that we talked about today and then focus on that, and just get started. I really think that whatever is the easiest one for you would be the best way to go because I think it's sort of like a rabbit hole kind of thing. Once you get familiar with one thing that we were talking about today, it's just going to naturally almost lead you. If you stay on the topic, it'll just naturally lead you to these other offshoots, or different pathways. And then you'll start seeing connections. Oh, I could play a single note melody line, but if I added one more note to that and I'm playing two, now it implies like a chord sound. Oh, and then I can add another note and I could play like a full triad.
Yeah.
Oh, I could
Absolutely.
strum it. Oh, I can arpeggiate it. Oh, I could play them as single notes. Oh, I could let notes continue to ring, if I can, possibly on a chord that I'm holding, or maybe not. It's just more of experimentation.
Yes.
You know what I mean? I
Yeah.
don't think I ever really sat down and said, I'm going to learn how to do this kind of thing. It sort of was like you learned one thing and then it led to the next and then it led to the next and it led to the next. I don't think, at least for me, I never sat down and said, I want to learn how to do this.
Yeah. And then I think I think getting curiosity is great. That's you want to be curious. And you
Yeah.
go, what if I did this or that? And then I think when you discover these things, then they start to become evident to you in the songs you play. Like you could learn a song and not really understand what's going on, but if you're also experimenting with these things, you kind of then start to oh, there's that thing that I was doing happening in this song, and you get an example of that happening, and then you find more of them, and you see, it just gives you more ideas of how to use them. All of it's in the music you listen to. It's just being aware of it and finding it, or playing around with it, applying
Yeah.
it.
And then, right. Or, if you're learning a particular song and it uses one of these elements, or if you're trying to learn the stuff in isolation, then it starts sounding like a song
Mm,
that you recognize.
yes.
You go back to that song and it's just this stuff is everywhere all the time.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know what I
Absolutely.
mean? You
Yeah,
know,
yeah.
there's just not there's just not really that much of a focus I see in when people learn guitar and this kind of stuff, which there should be because it's so common that it happens, you know?
Yes.
And I don't think that there's necessarily a right or wrong way in a linear way of step one, step two, step three, step four, you
Yep.
know, because they are so kind of intertwined with each other. But I would say just get started with
Yep.
and
Hmm.
that'll just actually, if you stay with this idea of adding this melody to chordal stuff, it'll just naturally lead to all the other things we talked about.
Yes.
It'll
Yep.
just naturally go there.
Absolutely.
Very cool. Well, Simon, I want to thank you very much for your time today. I know that you actually have something for everybody who's here, and I'm going
Sure.
to bring this up on the screen. You could tell us a little bit about it.
Sure. So this is obviously it's a finger picking ebook here, but it's a little bit more than that. Certainly, it's on finger picking. So if you like finger picking, it's 10 finger picking patterns that are very, very simple to play, but it's how I apply them that is the key to this. So in this ebook, there's 10 examples, 10 patterns. Each one's applied at least once. Maybe a couple of them applied a couple of times. Can't quite remember. But I avoid the usual sort of stuff. So it's not open chords and bar chords for the most part. It's going to be some of the things we're talking about today, little parts of triads and chord fragments and open strings droning and some melody notes being added. So kind of what the fretting hand does throughout this book is not exactly what we're talking about today necessarily, but it's along the same sorts of lines. And that's the key with fingerpicking, because I teach a lot of fingerpicking, and a common thing I hear across the time I've done this for many years now is that, give me some new patterns. I just sound the same when I'm doing my fingerpicking patterns. And it's not the patterns that's the problem. There's only, so many patterns. And if we just isolated the fingerpicking patterns, there's nothing that great about them. It's what the fretting hand's doing as you're applying the pattern. And if we just stick to open chords and bar chords, there is nothing wrong with that. I'm an advocate for open chords, bar chords. They're great. But if that's all we did, we're missing out on so much more. And often the alternatives, and I've certainly done it in this book, are easier to do than the open chords and the bar chords. They might not be as familiar to you up front as bar chords and open chords, but they are at least no harder, and in a lot of the cases much easier. But the result is a really nice, unique, much more advanced, sophisticated sounding chord progression with what is often a pretty simple, what people might call a plain finger picking pattern. So it comes with videos. So each example, you can see me play it, and you'll have the tablature. There's a video, there's links in the book that will take you to a page, and we'll have all the videos there, so you can see exactly what I'm doing. And that is free. You just have to go to the, if you got the URL there, Mark? I think it's acousticguitarlessonsonline.net/.
Yes.
If you've got it there, or I can grab it myself.
Grab it yourself, send it
And
to
I'll
me in
give
the
it to
chat,
you.
and I'll post it in the chat right now.
Yep, that is good. Give me one.
I don't know what I did with it. I'm so
right.
ill prepared here. Send it to me. Well,
here we go. I'll
type that out. I'll put it in the chat right now, but I just want to
Yeah.
make sure that everybody knows. I mean, this is a free resource. I mean, you got
Yes.
nothing to lose. You
Correct.
know, I mean,
Exactly.
why not? Even if this isn't your thing and you're here by accident today, why not?
Yeah.
It's not going to cost you anything.
Exactly. You can download it and do whatever you want with it, but
Exactly.
it's there, and you might find interest. Even if you don't finger pick the chords I use, you can use a pick with them, you can strum them, you can pick them out, whatever you want to do.
Yep.
So yeah, so that's something that some people might be interested in.
Yeah, very cool. Well, I actually have something as well, and it's actually pretty much the topic of our whole discussion, except it is the most elementary version of what we did, and we may not even have talked about it on this easy of a level. So it's called the Beginner's Guide to Adding Lead Guitar Elements to Your Rhythm Playing. Really what we're talking about is adding melody. So that's what the lead guitar elements are in the title. And it's very, very, very simple. It has diagrams and audio examples and everything like that as well. Once you download the PDF, it'll show you exactly what notes to play. And then I will play those notes. And when you do the same thing, it will sound exactly the same. And it really is super, super easy. Great entry level place to begin this whole thing that we were talking about. And you can find that at rhythmguitarlessons.net/pro. And like I said, that one is free as well. So if you like what we did and you don't know where to begin, this would be a good place to start. Very cool.
Excellent. I noticed you've probably seen it there, Mark, but there will be a replay of this on your YouTube channel, right?
Yes, this will be as soon as we're done with this and YouTube does its thing, probably within 5 minutes after this live broadcast is over. This is going to be able to view indefinitely forever, and you could pause, rewind, fast forward, everything like that.
Yep, cool. Because I had a few people email me leading up who couldn't make it with time zones and whatever, so I did direct them to specifically your live tab on your YouTube channel which has
Yeah.
all your previous live recordings. And I said it'll be there, yeah, like you say, 5 minutes or so.
I think it's something
Pretty
within
quick.
like 5 minutes after the live stream ends, it's actually there to view again.
Yes, doesn't take long.
No, it doesn't take long at all. It's pretty actually amazing.
Yes. The wonders of the internet.
Yeah, wonders of the internet. Well, again, Simon, I want to thank you very much for your time, all
You're
your
welcome.
knowledge, all your guitar playing. Wonderful. I learned something today too. The cash thing, that was very
Excellent.
cool. I like that. It's very cool.
Well, thank you for having me. Always good to be here, Mark. I appreciate it. And everybody who has rocked up today, thank you for being here. I hope it's given you some food for thought, both myself and Mark, in terms of what we offered. And thank you, Mark. Always good, always fun.
You're very welcome. All right, everybody.
Okay.
Take care.